In a quiet village just outside the soft rolling vineyards of Versailles, there lived a man named Etienne Marchand, a clockmaker known not for his words, but for the way time bent to his fingers. He was a man of soft footsteps and softer sighs, with spectacles forever slipping down his nose and hands that smelled of brass and lavender oil. He lived alone above his little shop, where the air was always filled with the muted chime of distant clocks ticking in sleepy unison, each one telling a different hour, none of them quite right, and yet all of them strangely soothing. The shop itself was a cradle of comfort. Oak shelves lined with dusty pocket watches, shelves stacked with forgotten timepieces wrapped in velvet, and a large grandfather clock in the corner that chimed whenever it pleased, as if it had a mind of its own. Every evening, just as twilight painted the windows in hues of honey and rose, Etienne would take down a small music box from the highest shelf. It was carved of dark cherry wood, smooth from years of polish, with tiny golden lilies etched into its corners. And inside, tucked beside the spring and gears, was something far more delicate than time, a single silk ribbon, once tied around the wrist of Lady Elise Beaumont. Lady Elise. The name itself stirred the air like perfume. She had come into his shop many years ago, not for a clock, but for stillness. She had spoken softly, as if the very act of breathing too loudly might awaken something fragile. Her eyes were like pale sapphires, always looking at things she could never keep. They had shared no grand affair, no scandalous whispers. But, oh, there had been something more powerful than romance between them, understanding. A quiet companionship born not from words, but from pauses. She would visit in the afternoons, sipping chamomile tea as Etienne adjusted delicate gears, his brow furrowed in concentration, while she simply watched, smiling. Then one day, like a breath exhaled too soon, she was gone. A letter arrived a week later, sealed with a crest he didn't recognize. It explained, in beautiful, heartbreaking prose, that she had been engaged to a baron far away, that her visits were no longer possible, and that she wished him a gentle life, full of slow mornings and clocks that never needed fixing. Etienne had never opened the second letter she sent. It still lay beneath the velvet lining of the music box, untouched. He couldn't bear to know if she had loved him. Sometimes the not knowing was gentler. Each night, he wound the music box with trembling fingers. The melody that played was one he had written for her, a soft waltz that never quite ended, its final note always lingering in the air like a question left unanswered. As the music played, he would sit in his wooden chair, the candlelight dancing across his cheeks, and let his mind wander, back to her smile, to the way she once rested her hand on his, as he showed her how a gear aligned with its teeth, like a lover finding a perfect fit. Sometimes he imagined her still listening. Sometimes he imagined she missed the sound of ticking clocks. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, he whispered, "Bonne nuit, Elise," into the air, just in case time was kind enough to carry it to her. The clocks ticked. The music box hummed. And Etienne drifted, not into sadness, but into peace. Because even in loneliness, there was rhythm. And even in the passage of time, there was still love. Tucked beneath ivy-covered stone arches and the whisper of cathedral bells, there stood an old library in Oxford. It wasn't the grandest in the city, nor the most modern. In fact, many had forgotten it entirely, except for one woman who had fallen in love with its silence. Her name was Ivy Lockwood. She had worked there for 7 quiet years, her footsteps soft against polished wood, her fingertips tracing the dust of forgotten pages. Ivy was not a woman of many words, but books. Books understood her. They never demanded anything but her time, her care, and her endless curiosity. She wore long skirts that whispered like leaves when she walked and tied her hair in the same bun each day, always held by 2 ivory pins. Her eyes were the color of faded letters, soft, knowing, and often lost in thought. One rainy afternoon, as droplets pattered gently against the stained glass windows and a golden lamplight flickered in the corner, Ivy was reshelving books in the farthest wing of the library, the quiet wing, as it was known, a place where time seemed to move slower, or not at all. She reached for an old volume titled Poetry from the Age of Ink, bound in leather cracked with age and worn smooth by love. As she opened it, a thin yellow envelope fluttered from between the pages and landed at her feet. No address, no stamp, just a name in faded ink. To my dearest, if only once. Her heart skipped, not out of fear but out of a strange, aching wonder. Inside, the letter was written in elegant cursive, words like falling feathers. You never knew my name, but I knew yours the moment you smiled. You were reading beneath the willow tree, and I stood there far too long, pretending to fix my collar, wishing the wind would turn the page for you. If I were brave, I would have said something. If I were cruel, I would have forgotten you. But I was neither. So I wrote this instead. Ivy read it once. Then again. And again. The words wrapped around her like warm tea and memory. They were tender, hesitant, real. The kind of letter written only when one believes no one will ever read it. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she dreamed, wide awake, of who might have written it. A student, a soldier, a stranger watching, from across the green. She imagined his hands, ink-stained and nervous, his eyes searching the crowd for her just one more time. She imagined he never found her again, and she imagined she might be the only person in the world who could give that letter the ending it deserved. In the days that followed, Ivy began to leave letters of her own inside books, not addressed to anyone, but written from the same softness she felt in her chest. Notes about stars, dreams, regret, hope, and with each letter, her dreams changed. At night, she found herself wandering long corridors lined with shelves that stretched into clouds. Lanterns floated in the air. Books whispered her name. And waiting. At the farthest end, always leaning against a shelf with a crooked smile, was him. The man who wrote the letter. He never had a face. Yet he felt familiar. As if he had always been there, waiting for her in the spaces between words. They never spoke. But in her dreams, he always reached for her hand. And she always let him. The real world remained as quiet as ever. Ivy still walked the library aisles, still dusted the same windows, still pressed forgotten pages back into place. But something had changed. She no longer felt alone. Because every letter she found, and every one she wrote, was a conversation between two hearts that had never met, and yet somehow already knew each other. And so, in the gentle stillness of that ancient library, Ivy Lockwood discovered something not even time could erase. That love, when it's written, from the soul, doesn't need a reply to exist. It just needs to be found. Once. Even if only between the pages of a forgotten book. The candle flickers. The rain hums, and Ivy smiles to herself as she slips another letter into a poetry book, just in case he's still searching. In a sleepy coastal village along the southern curve of Italy, where lemon trees bent lazily over stone walls and the sea murmured lullabies into the cliffs, lived a postman named Pietro Bellini. He was not a young man. His hair, once the color of coal, was now silvered with age and salt. His knees creaked like the hinges of the chapel doors, and his satchel had grown soft and worn from decades of loyal service. But every morning, without fail, Pietro rose with the sun, tied his leather shoes, packed his faded mailbag, and walked the cobbled lanes of the village, not out of obligation, not even habit, but because somewhere along the years, the letters had become more than envelopes. They had become his companions, his stories, his map of hearts. Most peculiar of all, Pietro had no official route anymore. His name had long vanished from government records. New postmen with polished boots and mechanical carts had taken over. But Pietro still walked. And strangely, the villagers still found letters in their mailboxes that they swore they hadn't sent or expected. He called them the forgotten letters, and they came from nowhere, and everywhere. One foggy morning, as gulls cried faintly above and dew kissed the vines, Pietro found a curious envelope tucked behind a loose brick outside an abandoned villa. It was sealed with rose-colored wax. No address. Just a single word. Marcella. His hands froze. The air shifted, as if the world itself paused to listen. Marcella. He hadn't spoken that name in over 30 years, not since the summer she left. Marcella had been a painter, a quiet woman with eyes like storm clouds and laughter like wine. She had come to the village for a season to paint the sea, and ended up painting Pietro's soul instead. They had spent only one summer together. One summer of stolen kisses beneath fig trees. One summer of paint-stained fingers brushing his cheek as she laughed. One summer of promises neither of them were sure how to keep. She had been engaged to a man back in Iondas, Florence. Judy pulled her away. Love couldn't anchor her. But before she left, she painted a portrait of him, seated beneath the olive tree in her garden, looking not at her, but at the horizon. She never let him see it. One day, she said, when time has grown old and kind. Now, staring at the envelope in his hand, Pietro felt the years melt like wax under a candle flame. He opened it. Dearest Pietro, if you are reading this, it means time did not forget us. I left this letter here long ago, in the only place I believed it might wait for you. I don't know if you're still walking your quiet roads, or if you still whistle that little tune you used to hum when sorting letters. But I want you to know, I never painted anyone else after you. You were my last muse, and the painting, the one I promised you, still hangs in the villa, waiting. Come see it, one last time. Marcella. Pietro's throat caught, his breath too. He looked up at the old villa, the shutters closed, the garden wild, the stone steps blanketed in years of silence. And yet, it felt as if she had just stepped out for tea. He walked through the broken iron gate, the sound of gravel crunching beneath his boots. Inside, the villa was dust-covered but warm. The air smelled of turpentine and dried roses. And there, in the center of the main room, hung the painting. It was him, just as she had promised. But he was not looking at the sea. He was looking at her, and in her brushstrokes, you could see everything they had never said aloud. Love, loss, and the hope that some things, though delayed, are never lost. Pietro sat down in front of the canvas. The room was still. Outside, the sea whispered like a lullaby. He smiled. For the first time in years, he took off his mailbag, leaned back in the old wicker chair, and closed his eyes. Not to forget, but to remember. Gently. The villagers say the painting is still there, untouched. And every so often, a letter with no stamp and only one name appears in someone's mailbox. Marcella, Pietro, or simply, to the one who waited. No one knows where they come from. But some believe Pietro still walks the winding roads between memory and time, delivering not letters, but love that never quite made it in time, but always arrived eventually. In the heart of old Charleston, where the magnolia trees hung heavy with sweet perfume and the streets shimmered with cobblestone memory, there lived a woman who spoke little, yet her stitches told stories that made hearts tremble Her name was Clara Belle Duval. Clara was a seamstress, known not for fashion but for feeling. She didn't just make clothes. She embroidered souls into the seams. Each dress, each coat, each pair of gloves that left her tiny shop on Church Street carried a secret. Small messages stitched in silk thread along the hem, like whispered prayers. She worked alone in a warm little attic space above an apothecary, where the floor creaked with age and golden light filtered through gauzy curtains. The room always smelled of lavender, old wood, and beeswax. And the only sounds were the soft snip of scissors, the whisper of needle through cloth, and the faint hum of Clara's breath. But the silence in her world wasn't lonely. It was sacred. Clara had once been a singer. Her voice could fill a cathedral and still feel like a secret. But illness had taken that part of her, left her voice no louder than a feather's sigh. People thought she had vanished from the world, but she hadn't vanished. She had transformed. She spoke now with her fingers, with her eyes, with every careful motion of needle to fabric. Her clients didn't know, but she often wept over the wedding dresses she crafted. She added tiny hearts to mourning veils. And in every coat she made for a child, she hid a stitched star, so they'd never feel lost. One dusky autumn afternoon, a man came to her shop, tall, quiet, and elegant in a way that didn't ask for attention. His name was Henry Whitmore, a writer who had recently returned from Europe after years abroad. His voice was low and gentle, like pages turning. And when he looked at Clara, it was not with pity or curiosity. It was with respect. He placed a worn satchel on the table and unfolded a sketch of a coat. "For winter," he said softly. "But I'd like something hidden. A message in the lining. A line from a poem." He paused, unsure. "It's for someone I haven't met yet." Clara raised her brow in surprise, and he smiled. "She exists," he added. "I just haven't found her." She nodded slowly, her fingers already running across the sketch as if it were a piano key. She didn't ask for more. She simply touched the velvet he brought, dark blue, like midnight, and began her work. Over the following weeks, Henry returned often. Not to check the coat, but to watch her work. To sit in the corner chair and sip tea. To share thoughts without pressing for replies. He read her poems aloud. She answered with looks. He asked her once if she missed singing. She replied by stitching a song into a scarf and handing it to him, each note carefully embroidered in gold thread. He understood. One evening, as twilight spilled across the windows like warm wine, Clara stitched the final thread into Henry's coat. And inside, beneath the left lapel, she had sewn his chosen line. "To the one I'll love when silence is no longer empty. Only full." She added one more thing he didn't ask for. Her initials, hidden beneath the poem in the smallest, most delicate of threads. When Henry tried the coat on, he didn't speak. He simply stepped forward and reached for her hand. Warm, work-worn, beautiful. Clara didn't pull away. In that moment, no words were needed. Not a vow, not a confession. Their silence was a language of its own, louder than any orchestra. They didn't fall in love all at once. They seeped into each other's lives, like ink into parchment. Slow, irreversible, true. And though Clara never sang again, she began to hum softly as she stitched, especially when Henry sat nearby, writing with his fingers smudged in ink and eyes full of her. Years later, her shop still stands, now preserved as a museum for artisan crafts. But if you look closely at the sleeves of the coats on display, you'll find tiny golden thread, soft as breath, spelling out poems never published. And if you listen very carefully, especially on quiet afternoons when the light is golden and time seems slow, you might hear it, the sound of a needle, the rhythm of a heartbeat, and the softest hum of a seamstress in love. In a quiet town cradled by the mountains of Kyoto, where bamboo forests swayed like whispers and koi ponds mirrored the stars, lived a woman who never stopped waiting. Her name was Sakura, like the cherry blossom that bloomed and fell all too quickly. Sakura made lanterns, not ordinary ones. Hers were delicate things, born from rice paper and willow frames, painted with the softest brush strokes. Flowers, birds, and sometimes faces. No two were ever the same, and yet all of them held the same secret. They were made for one man. Every evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon and the dragonflies began their slow golden dance across the water, Sakura would light a single lantern. She would step out onto the edge of the narrow canal behind her home, barefoot, hair pinned loosely with pearl combs, and gently lower the lantern onto the surface. The flame inside flickered, the paper glowed, and the lantern drifted, carried by the current toward the open lake, where the sky and water became one. Each night, one lantern. Each night, one memory. Each night, one wish whispered into the wind. She had begun the ritual many years ago, after the war took her beloved away. His name had been Renjiro, a quiet ronin, a masterless samurai with a poet's heart. They had met when he sought refuge in her village, injured and soft-spoken. She had nursed him back to health in the back room of her lantern shop, speaking very little and listening a great deal. In the months that followed, they fell into a rhythm as natural as breath. He helped her stretch paper. She made him tea. He mended fences. She stitched his robe. They never kissed in the public eye. But on quiet nights, by the light of a single lantern, they would sit with knees barely touching, sharing silence deeper than any vow. He never said he loved her. He didn't have to. Then one day he was gone. No farewell. No letter. Just an empty futon and the scent of his robe left behind. The war had called him again. She waited. Days became seasons. Seasons became years. People whispered that he had died. Others said he had forgotten her. But Sakura, she believed in neither. She believed in the weight of silence. She believed in the way he had once said, "If I don't return, follow the lanterns. I will find you by their light." So she lit one every night. And every night, her painted memory of him floated gently down the canal, carrying her heart with it. Some said she was mad. But love, in its deepest form, often looks like madness to those who've never loved that way. On her 41st birthday, something strange happened. She had painted a new lantern with trembling hands. One final image. Renjiro, as she remembered him. Sharp jawline, crescent scar on his cheek, eyes full of things he never said. She placed it, on the water like all the others. But this one drifted slower, almost reluctant. The moon was full. The air smelled of night-blooming jasmine. And when she turned to go back inside, she heard it. A voice. Low. Familiar. Saying her name like it was the only word he ever remembered. Sakura. She turned. And there he stood. Older. Weary. Wounded. But alive. Holding the very first lantern she had ever released. Faded, water-stained, but still glowing faintly in his hands. "I followed them," he said. "Everyone. They lit my path home." She didn't cry. Not then. She simply stepped forward, placed her forehead to his chest, and whispered the words she had stitched into every lantern. I never stopped lighting the way. That night, they sat by the canal as the lanterns floated past them like stars. He held her hand. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in many years, she didn't light a lantern, because he was there. the light had come home. Today, the canal still runs quietly through the town. Lanterns still float on its surface, during festivals, glowing like memories too beautiful to hold. And if you stand there in the stillness of evening, you might feel it, a warmth in the air, a whisper in the reeds, the soft echo of a woman who waited, and a man who returned by following her light. Far beyond the noise of cities, deep in the New Mexico desert, where the wind whispered to the sand and the nights fell endless and black, there lived a woman who listened to the sky. Her name was Eleanor Gray, an astronomer, reclusive and gentle, with eyes like midnight velvet, and a voice so soft it felt like moonlight. She lived in a weather-worn observatory perched on a hill, surrounded by nothing but cacti, rustling sagebrush, and silence. From there she mapped the stars, not to chart the universe, but to find him. His name was James Calder, a fellow scientist, a lover of riddles, sunrises, and the poems carved into ancient constellations. He had once promised her the moon, not as a gesture, but as a goal. "One day," he whispered one night as they lay on the observatory roof beneath the shimmering cosmos, "we'll name a star that no one's ever seen, just for us. And when we're long gone, the sky will remember." She had smiled, kissed him, and said, "Then we'll live there too." But fate, like the stars, can be beautiful and cold. James vanished during a classified research mission tied to a mysterious signal picked up near the edge of Earth's atmosphere. His plane disappeared. No wreckage, no answers. Just silence. The officials called it a tragic accident, but Eleanor never believed it. Not entirely, because a week after the announcement, a frequency came through her telescope array, a soft static, too rhythmic to be random, and buried inside the wave, a sound. 3 syllables, whispered, distorted, but unmistakable. Nor. From that night on, she began broadcasting back. Every evening, as the desert air cooled and the stars painted the heavens like ancient lullabies, Eleanor would step into her dome, activate her transmitter, and speak. "James, it's still me. I haven't stopped looking. If you can hear me, follow the frequency. I'm still waiting." Then she would read a poem, or hum their song, or simply describe what the stars looked like that night, in case he could see them. 2. She never stopped. Years passed. Her hair turned silver, but her eyes never lost their light. The townsfolk whispered about the star widow on the hill, and children made up stories about the woman who spoke to the sky. But no one laughed, because her love was the kind people don't forget, the kind they secretly hope is real, and every now and then, others claim to hear it too, the reply. Not words, not music, just a soft pulse, like a heartbeat traveling through space. Some said it was just feedback, but Eleanor called it a promise, keeping itself alive. Then, one night, everything changed. The air was unusually still, the sky clearer than she'd ever seen. The stars sparkled, with a kind of hush, as if the universe had taken a breath. She sat by her telescope, her recorder running, her tea growing cold. And then it came. A hum, a pattern, a burst of light in the distance. No, a falling star, but moving far too slow. She stepped outside, barefoot, heart pounding softly. The object drifted down in silence, glowing not with fire but with memory. When it landed just beyond the ridge, she walked, calmly, reverently, like approaching a dream. And there, beneath a sky full of their stars, she found something strange, a small silver capsule, and inside it, a letter, written in James's handwriting, unaged, untouched, impossible. Eleanor, if you are reading this, then the stars did not forget us. I followed your voice. Every word, every whisper, every night. Time bent, space stretched. I don't understand it all, but your love kept me tethered. I'm coming home. I always promised you the moon. Now I bring you a piece of it. James. They never found the capsule again. Some say Eleanor vanished that night. Others say she passed peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her lips, her hands clasped around the letter. But if you go to the old observatory now, you'll find her telescope still pointed at a small, unnamed star near the edge of the charted sky. It glows a little brighter than the rest, and if you listen closely, you might hear it. The soft hum of love, traveling across time, whispering a promise kept. You find yourself standing at the edge of a dream, not quite asleep, not quite awake. The air is still. The sky above you is neither day nor night, but something in between, a soft watercolor of fading purples, honey gold, and silver blue. There's no wind, yet the leaves shimmer as if swayed by breath. The world smells faintly of old pages, candle wax, and something deeply familiar. Before you is a path, made not of stone or soil, but of softly glowing lanterns, each one flickering gently with light that feels alive. You begin to walk, barefoot, unafraid. Each step carries you deeper into something you cannot name, but your heart remembers it. The first lantern you pass shows an old clockmaker. He's sitting in a workshop filled with ticking things and quiet, longing. He winds a music box and whispers a name. Elise. The second lantern glows with the image of a woman in an Oxford library holding a faded love letter close to her chest. She doesn't need to know who wrote it, because she's begun to write her own, to the one I may never meet, but already love. The third lantern flickers over a coastal road in Italy. An old postman reads a letter sealed in rose wax, tears on his cheeks, a smile on his lips. A painting hangs in the background, a man looking not at the sea, but at the woman who painted him. You walk on, slower now. The fourth lantern reveals a small attic room in Charleston. A seamstress hums as she stitches golden thread into the lining of a coat. A man watches her with quiet reverence, as if she's composed of something more than flesh and bone. Our silence was never empty, he had once told her. It was always full of you. The fifth lantern floats on the surface of a canal in Japan. A woman lowers it onto the water with trembling hands. Behind her, a man stands holding the first lantern she ever made. They do not speak. They do not need to. The sixth glows with starlight. An observatory in the desert. A woman watches the night sky, broadcasting messages across galaxies. A capsule lands quietly. And inside, his promise. I followed your voice. And then, just ahead, is a seventh and final lantern. This one is different. Larger, softer, flickering in hues of lavender and gold. You kneel beside it. Inside, you see your own reflection, dreamlike, peaceful, eyes half closed. But you're not alone. The figures from every story stand beside you now, not as ghosts or memories, but as echoes of love lived truly, in the quiet, in the waiting, in the whispers. Their faces are serene, their hearts at rest. The clockmaker, the librarian, the postman, the seamstress, the lantern maker, the astronomer. All of them dreamed, all of them waited, and in their own way, all of them were found. You close your eyes, and in that final dream, you understand. Time was never the enemy. Distance was never a wall. Love, true, soft, patient love, was always the thread weaving every moment together. The wind sighs. The lanterns fade one by one. The stars blink slowly overhead, like sleepy guardians. And finally, you drift into the gentlest kind of sleep. A sleep made not of forgetting, but of remembering everything beautiful from the quiet side of time. Good night, dreamer. The stories are resting now. So may you.